things and going beyond the fence of your home or going to forest and all that, but the subtitle says breaking out of the jail of limitations. That tells you that the words that are being talked about in this book are actually words. Interestingly, this book has been written by my friend, whom I've known for a number of years. And I was just telling him before the camera, before we are live, that I don't think I have known him as much as I've known him in the book. When you read this book, some of the things I discovered about him, I think I knew just a glimpse of through our everyday conversation, was how well learned he is, how he has read so many books. Was also what a great thinker he is. I loved the perspective. There are some verses that he quoted, verses that I have known for a long time that I have read some people write about, but the way he gets insights, the insights that he brings out of that verse are super interesting. I'll share some of them with you as we go on. Another thing that I saw was how a Pan-African he is, to be honest. You look at this book, you just think it's a self-help book, or if it's going to be, if it's going to benefit more than you, it's going to be about church because he's a Christian and he will write about church, definitely. But I didn't realize how he keeps, reading it, I realized how he keeps coming back to what we are as Africans, our conditions and how they can be improved. And there is a way that someone could just speak from global terms, but there is being particular about the situation of Africans and how they can improve. So I realized what a great Pan-African he is. And also, he's a great writer. I said he's a great communicator, he's a great writer too. There's a book that we did some time back by Kadiza, it's called Wait Under the Rainbow. And this man right here was mentioned, he was acknowledged for having helped. He's called Enock Luyonza, and please allow me to welcome him. Join me as we welcome him. Welcome, brother.
Thank you so much.
How are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Such a joy for me to have you.
I'm so glad that I could come and join with you on this wonderful program.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for lots of wisdom you've shared in this book.
Wow.
And a lot of wisdom that you're about to share tonight. I'll do my best to get as much from you as I can.
I hope I will have a good conversation, and yourself will have a good one.
I have no doubt about that. I definitely know that we'll have a great conversation. Yeah, I didn't know of, we've met in a number of places. I've spoken to you one-on-one. We've been in small meetings and big meetings. And I don't know how I had always missed the Pan-African you are.
Wow. You know they say men are white and deep. I can see a side of you and relate to that side of you and never get to explore the other side many don't see. So I tend to believe we all have sides to us. We are multifaceted, and maybe you got to a side of me you had never interacted with, and I'm glad you like that side of me.
I loved it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
Yeah. So to our viewers, I only mentioned your name, Enock Luyonza, but it would be great if you could tell them more about yourself.
Right. Where do we begin? My name is Enock, as they say, Luyonza. Luyonza is my dad's name. So I'm from the Luyonza household. I grew up like most people around, you know our nation's history, how we like tragedies after tragedies. So my parents were refugees in Uganda. So part of my life was back in Kampala, where I grew up. But my parents, I think my grandparents left in the 50s. And even my parents were born in Uganda in the 50s. So I am a son of former refugees but I'm glad about our nation that it was liberated, and here we are enjoying our country and wise great leadership. But sorry to cut there.
It's all right.
I come from a family of 7 siblings, 5 brothers, 2 sisters. My dad passed away some time back in 2003. And in the book, if you read, you will see that highlighted somewhere. And I'm so grateful that I got to experience what I experienced. Sometimes we go through things and we feel like we don't want to share them with the world because we think they are very shameful. Yet it is those things that make us, that form us. And for me, part of my family history, however bad or shameful or harmful it looks, it is what has played in forming who I am today. So I'm grateful to be part of that family. Also to have all that bits and pieces in my personal history, like growing up in Kampala, and here we are. Probably if those bits and pieces didn't happen, probably I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm grateful. I don't know if you have get something out of that, but
Yeah, I did.
yeah.
It's interesting the way you keep coming on. There's even a place that you keep saying, I am guilty of, having pessimistic, I'm guilty of so many things. And when you were telling us of your story of how you grew up from a refugee camp, I think more than we realize, and I think it's a little hard to say this, but it's so much true in so many ways. With the tragedy of 1959 and how bad it is and how it has created hell for so many people, somehow I think Rwanda is coming from all these other places and coming back together after 1994 was sort of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
When you read your story, when you read the paragraph or paragraphs when you mention about your father's death, when I read it, I wondered if your siblings wouldn't be very angry with you because, like after mentioning the story, immediately transition into how of a blessing it has become, how God has turned that into a blessing. And I was like, I mean, I'm kind of comparing it to how coming from these kinds of backgrounds, where you were born and where you grew up from, there's so many stories you tell about where you grew up from. The story, I don't remember the name, but in the chapter where you talk about imitation, how your brother John imitated someone, you tell so much about where you grew up from and what life was like. And so when I sit with you, and last time I sat with another author, it's called Bruno. Not last time, like 2-3 weeks ago. He was born here, he grew up from here, he survived the genocide. And then last 2 Sundays, I think, I also sat with Apostle Masasu. He grew up in Congo. And I think that history of ours, it's very rich for our nation.
It's beautiful. I feel like it is those stories that shape who we are and even bring flavor to our communities. When you hear other people's upbringing, like there is a way you can relate to that, but also that diversity, that richness is what makes us interesting people to be around, do life with. So I maybe this is for someone, never discount your story, never discount what you went through, because it is so valuable to even the people around you. So I am one of those who, as I've grown up, as I grow up, I realized that I have to celebrate where God has brought me from. And you see, this is like another thing I feel like our audience should know. When you forget, you are wicked. How or why? We go through things and you don't know how you will navigate it through them. And we tend to hide them under the carpet. Yet, it is those very things that if you remember when you talk about them, you help another navigate. They would be in the same place. But when you don't talk about them, when you don't remember them, you are a wicked person.
That's true.
Yeah. So let's never forget. I love, one of the things I love about the government of Rwanda is how they have created this sort of memory about the genocide. Every year they talk about it, so that you don't forget what happened, so that you don't repeat the same thing. So for anyone, if this would be your takeaway, don't be wicked. Remember where I got you from. But also you never know who would be going through the same thing.
Yeah, and in your book you keep repeating that we should leave the earth far better than it was, and it should bring the kingdom of God, the heaven on earth.
Yeah.
So I think we do that by remembering where we came from and the kind of things that we have gone through, and helping those who come after us never to be in the same place. Yeah, and I think if we continue from there, we'd have a whole conversation without going into the book.
I know.
So, let's get into the book. In the introduction of the book, that's page 2. On page 2, you wrote and signed, "Beyond Walls," which is the name of the book, is about stepping out of the confines of our comfort zones, those walls within which we have grown comfortable, to embrace and cultivate positive change in our communities as well as around the world. It's about braving the irritation and risk of the unfamiliar to catalyze positive change, not only in our individual lives, but in those of others. Yeah, that's what you said that this book is about. Yeah. How did this book come about? I would like you to give us more of why you wrote the book, but also help us a bit with how it came about. I believe it was your first?
Yeah.
So a lot of people struggle with bringing their first projects out. What was it for you? What was it like for you to write your first book, and what did you want to focus on in Beyond Walls?
Well, many things to talk about for why I wrote that book, but really one for me was I have this background where I wouldn't talk, I wouldn't express myself. I was shy, timid, really shy. But I've also had the privilege of growing up in a homestead where they told us the value of the person of Jesus. So one thing about Jesus, who we all believe, most of us I believe, is the more you come to him, you realize that he is calling you to much more. So you would be stuck in a place where you are timid, shaken, but on the other side, there is always an invitation. There is more to your life.
That's true.
Than what you are afraid of. So it was in that, as you're growing up, you are hearing this invitation deep inside you that there is much more to you than what you are allowing happen. You can share some ideas with other people. You can bring value. But the way to bring value for most people, it would be expressing yourself in public to talk. Now for me, that was a no-go. I wouldn't really talk to people because of the way I spoke and the way I speak. So anyway, I remember while in high school, I began being exposed to writing because I didn't want to know, but I had things inside me boiling. I would begin writing. So I remember at my high school, which we went to Cornerstone, I would do the news for the school. So I would literally write on the blackboard. I had a corner where I report what is going on. And the student body, everyone enjoyed that part of...
There was at Silly Boys in Ghana.
Yes.
Wow, I've been there and it was an amazing experience.
So that community, I would gather news, information, and write on the board. And when I saw the reaction from the audience, from my community, it was fulfilling. It felt like I was bringing value. What I wouldn't express in speech, I would express in writing. And the emotion, you would see people happy. And that was, in a way, for me, fulfilling. So what I didn't know is that something was happening to me. I was learning to write in that process. And I began writing. Then fast forward, I leave high school and I come into contact with a man who is still my mentor today and my pastor, Apostle Moses Moksa. I salute that man of God. So when I came in his space,
it's evident that you've learned so much from him in this book.
Yes.
You can read this book and you know that these two people have been very close.
So what I want to talk about, I actually want to talk about it in honor of him. When I came in his space, he had written at that time probably 2 or 3 books. Now seeing that and knowing where I was coming from, something spoke inside me. So you see, the thing is, transformation happens where there is a reference.
That's right.
Whenever we don't have a reference, you can't refer to anything.
That's right.
So transformation can't happen. So for me, the beautiful thing was there was an individual in my circle who had written, and he was showing me what was possible. And because of that, I began, and he began calling me higher. And so because there was a reference point in my environment, I began tinkering with writing. And here we are, many years later, I wrote the first book. I think that is how I actually got to sit down and begin writing the book. But the second point I really wrote is that I wanted to overcome my limits, which was speech. So for me, it was speech. I was like, I can't express myself. Then, okay, you can't. But yet, there was stuff inside me I could bring out. So how do we bring those out? And the alternative then for me was to begin writing down. And as I wrote, the book came out. Even as I'm talking about this, I'm hearing voices in my mind. I read a book by a gentleman, a Jewish rabbi, Daniel Lapin. It's called Thou Shalt Prosper. And in that book he writes and says that we all come in the world with a handicap, but also a blessing, like a thing,
potential, a
potential, yeah. But the problem for many of us is we concentrate on the handicap, yeah. So you never see what you can actually do. You always see, oh, I'm limited. For you could be a lady and you think that is your handicap. Or for me, a wall. So my wall was really speech. But here is the funny thing. After writing that book, writing was a way of me running away from talking. But after writing that book, God has a sense of humor. I find that I now talk more. I began getting invitation like this one to talk about.
The book, yeah.
Yet, my idea was running away from talking. Like, I began writing to run away from talking. But yet, this is beyond words. The thing I feared the most was talking.
Now what you doing?
Now what I'm doing. So it's really
There's another group of people that you talk about. Man, this book, yeah, people have got to read it. When you're talking about your encounter with is he an apostle? Apostle Mukisa, Moses. You reminded me of something I read in the book, I think somewhere around the last chapters, where you talk about what happens when we encounter greatness. I think you were talking about the glory of God. What happens when we encounter the greatness. And I've seen, if we were only to talk about what happened, I'm pretty sure that whoever went through Cornerstone, something happened inside of them. They might know it, they might not know it, but everybody, and regardless of whatever kind of experiences you've had there, there's something that happened to you. And I think it was more from the people that we met there. You mentioned Mzee Paul Lukia, his soul rest in peace, and Uncle Tim. And I know, at least Paul Lukia was a close friend of mine. I even went to visit him in Gulu.
Wow.
But I haven't really had like a personal chat with Uncle Tim, for example. But I'm telling you, I know for you that a lot of deposits that are in my life, a lot of things that have carried me through so many things, are things that I've learned from there. And I think, I don't want to jump into other chapters, but we will talk about mentorship. There's a chapter in which you talk about mentorship, and I would really like us to get hold of that, because I look around and I see that a lot of people that have done anything with their lives have had a chance to learn from someone.
Actually, not to go ahead of ourselves, but it is interesting how a life can literally move from like at that point to a lighter place just because they followed someone. And anytime God will help someone to elevate them, most times I've realized He brings people around them. He brings them in the company of other people, brilliant people. And for me, honestly, it has been that story that God was merciful for me. He brought brilliant people around me. Now, there is no way I would have this conversation if you were not in my space.
That's right.
It is that God is always orchestrating such things to help people. So I'm always grateful that God brings people my way for me.
It was very hard for me to pick which parts we should talk about, because right now I'm very tempted to ask you about the gang. I don't have enough time, so let's go to a company of good friends, brilliant people is interesting. So, anyways, let's go to chapter 1, and on verse 6, on page 6, sorry. You talk about your individual limitations and how they had like limited your life so much, but also how when you went to UK, a lot of things changed about your life. And I would like you to kind of share a bit about it with our viewers.
Wow.
Because like there's something you just mentioned earlier when you said that in our lives we tend to focus on our weaknesses, and we completely ignore our strength. Yet our strength could actually help in covering our shortfalls, if I may call them so.
Well, so in 2012, I go to this land, the UK, you know, and coming from the background, I was coming from this other world. There were totally two different worlds for me. But I go in that world with my walls in my head. So I go in that world, I am shy, I am timid, because of the thing I grew up with, a speech impediment. So I enter into this space. So I was working, volunteering with a church, an Anglican church, south of a church. And while there, again, anytime God will help a man, he brings them in a company of brilliant people. So I'm around brilliant people, learning different things. They are holding me higher, they are giving me opportunities to grow and to serve. But there is this limiting thing in me. I am fearing to express myself. But the thing was, I wasn't sure of what to share. I always had, but I was timid because of the wall of speech in front of me. Anyway, I go in this world with this complexity. I wouldn't know. Well, but like I say in the book, I also had grown up with an eating disorder. So before 2012, I was so tiny. Most people look at me and they're like, you man, you are big. But when you see me back then, I remember while at school, that the principal then would make fun of how I looked. I was like, so one day it was almost raining, there was a windstorm out, and he told guys, run and help Enock inside, the wind can take him. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was, my body frame structure was really, I was small. I didn't have, I wasn't comfortable in my skin. On top of that, the way I talked. So these were all not helping. But I'm in this world, and every time I would share in, say, fellowships, these guys would think I had something to say. So one friend of mine had an interest in my condition and decided to, like, why don't we go visit a doctor and we see what's wrong with you. Anyway, long story short, while there I get a surgery, which was an expensive surgery, a whole big story for another day.
Yeah, that's what you say in the book, actually.
Yeah, really big, but it was good orchestrating things, and they corrected the way, because when I was growing up, eating was a problem. Every time I swallow, I would have food go through the nose or the gullet. So, yet for most people, it only goes through down. So, for me, eating was, I dreaded eating growing up. So, it explained why I was tiny. But while in the UK, they corrected that thing by surgery. So, eating now is normal. But even my speech has improved because of that surgery. And man, God is amazing. When he wants you to go beyond the wall, he will make things, put things in place so that you go through them, but they are for you, for your going beyond. And this is not just my story. This is for everyone listening to us, watching us. For every wall you might be having right now, your Maker has already laid out strategies around you to the end that you may go beyond that wall. So look at the brighter side of life. Be hopeful. Be, have a hope, and before you know it, the walls will be broken. I hope I have answered okay.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You did. And oh man, it's interesting. When I was reading the book, you didn't talk about you being small that much.
Yeah.
But I know I used to be very, very small too. And for me, where I grew up, there were a lot of fighting as young boys.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
looked after cows, and that goes with a lot of fighting, a lot of competition that is physical and all that. And also, I was always among the youngest in my classes. So my peers, whom were my classmates, were not a match for me. Sometimes I would be ashamed to go and fight with kids who are in previous classes that I've already left. So, and I remember how I realized that I didn't play any sports because of this. I realized that was consistent all my life, because I wouldn't play with my classmates. First of all, they were way older than me, but also they were like bigger than me.
Yeah.
And now that I've grown up, there's some sports that I've actually started to play recently.
Wow.
When I'm in my late 20s and
Wow.
early 30s, because because I couldn't do that. I was limited, and I could have actually. I could have played with other kids, not at school maybe, but at home. But I didn't want to do that because I was always afraid. I was always scared. The book I told you that we did some 2 weeks ago on fear, and of which you also come back to in this book somehow. There's the way these walls, these weaknesses, if I may call them so, they kind of trap us.
Yeah, a lot.
And our strength, our potential are completely ignored.
Yeah.
We don't realize that we have, even when people keep telling you that you are great, you do this great, you don't want to believe that about yourself, yet others believe it about you.
And anytime we are not believing ourselves, we are in a way frustrating those who are holding us, who are seeing the greatness in us.
Yeah.
We are frustrating them, but also we are not moving into our, like, that thing that is already in us. When you hold what is out of me, but I don't recognize it, I am doing myself a disservice.
That's true.
And I'm frustrating you.
That's very true.
Yeah, because I'm not living up to what you are seeing inside me. And I think for everyone, we have to get to that place where you accept the words, you say, okay, I have them, but also there is this reality, there is that word people are seeing out of me, and it is about time I personally hold it out. I hold it out, and that is when I think we begin to live.
That's true.
Otherwise, if we do not acknowledge and arrest those weaknesses, those mindsets happening in our mind, we would live but are not living. We would be like zombies. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'll be moving you very, very quickly today because of time. There's something I didn't want to pick more than one lesson from each chapter. I wanted to pick just one thing from each chapter so that we use time effectively. But on chapter 1, I couldn't resist from asking you about the words of this professor, the Zimbabwean professor that you met at university in Mukono when you had visited your brother. And he said something that I found very, very interesting. And you also say that it has really been very instrumental in your life. Yeah. He said that life was a series of arrivals and departures. So for ordinary people like ourselves, what do you mean by that, and how has it impacted your life?
Wow. So I visit my brother at the university, and on that Sunday morning he invites me to go with him at that chapel. And there is this visiting professor.
Which brother of yours is that? Because you mentioned all your brothers in this book.
Actually, that is my older brother, John.
I think he's your favorite. I've met Joshua, but I hope he doesn't get jealousy. I think John, the way you talk about John in this book, is your favorite.
I think we need a lot of, also being my older brother, he showed me many things, so that I find it like natural to just have him in stories. But anyway, I went to his university to visit him, and there was this man, and he was talking about arrivals. Life is a series of arrivals and departures. And what does that mean? So, unfolding that as he was talking, it later makes sense when I begin seeing this statement play out in my life. So arrivals are really things you arrive at, or life brings you into. And the partners, as I talk in the book, they would be bitter or sweet. And for me, I've had a series of bitter and sweet. And in the book, I highlight one of the bitter departures, the incidents of my dad passing when we were young in a big city. Our dad was the big breadwinner. We are many in a city. Like my mom can barely, bring all of us to survive. So we really didn't know where the next meal was coming from. But that departure of my dad became significant in my life in a way of what would come next, which would be arrivals of a certain opportunity. I tend to believe maybe that we wouldn't have met if that departure of my dad never happened. Probably I wouldn't have gone through the leadership academy. So life is really a series of arrivals and departures. There are great things that come our way, and there are bad things. But all those, the Bible says they work together for our good.
That's right.
Yeah. And I in the little I could talk about is really that, is you will always have certain departures, meet our sweet and arrivals. We are holding in our hands a book I arrived at by, seeing other individuals write. It was an arrival for me. It was a series of arrivals to arrive at producing this
book.
piece. Yeah. And so every one of us, we have different series of arrivals and departures. And that is the tension we are always in.
For me, I loved it because, like you said, it simplifies my life to know that whatever I am losing, if I may call it losing, or whatever is departing from my life, is meant to be. It's life. Life is supposed to be like that. And whether it's sweet or bitter, it's still part of life. But also the hope that comes from knowing that if the things that I'm departing from, there are also others that are coming in. Am I open-minded enough to see the things that are coming in my life? So, and I think as people read, because here we're just mentioning a few things, but when people read, they discover much more in the book. So I'll go to chapter 2, Living with Intention. The one we're talking about is chapter 1, which is called Trapped by Limitation. So chapter 2, on page 21, there's something that you said that is interesting. Man, it was crazy. In fact, you keep quoting Andrew Womack with this. I realized that you quoted it even after that. Like you quoted it in another couple places of what Andrew Womack said. He said, to do what Jesus did, you have to do what Jesus did. So, like, you have to read the statement twice for you to understand. To do what Jesus did, you have to do what Jesus did. But then later on you said, we as Christians tend to admire what some men and women of God have done. We desire to walk in similar or even greater path, but we fail to attach the price that these men and women have to pay for the great deeds they accomplish. Like, I would like you to tell us about the cost of success, the cost of doing great things. Because like you said in the book, I think we always miss it. We want to be like the people that we admire, but we don't want to pay the price that they have paid.
So like that statement, and Womack says, to do what Jesus did, you have to do what Jesus did. So most people would read about, say, the miracles of Jesus, say the feeding of the 5,000, and like, one day I want to feed 5,000. But what you don't know, there was a thing he did in the private. The scripture says, he would rise up early in the morning before dawn and pray to the Father. He had a relationship no one knows about. So before you are going to attempt the bigger thing, before you want to attempt what President Kagame has attempted, first find out what happens in his private time.
Yeah.
Then you will have a clue at what you are able to accomplish like him. So most times what we see of people, we see like you see the flash in your eyes, but there is what you don't see. And I believe what you see is a child of what you don't see. Is born from what we don't see. And I want to liken this to a tree. You see, when a tree is growing up, you drop the seed on the ground, it goes in the ground, in the soil. But there is work that happens down under. No one sees that.
That's right.
Under that soil is damp, it is dark. No one is interested to know what's under. I like to think that we are like trees. No one that the psalmist writes, you will be like a tree planted by a river of water. So we are like a tree, but when you look at that tree, before you see the shoot, there was a growth beneath when no one was watching. And that is important. And when you don't have an understanding, you will get frustrated when what is seen is not blossoming. You will be frustrated. Why are others blossoming and I'm not? Probably you are paying attention to the wrong thing. First pay attention to what is unseen. Yeah, it is really that in the short answer I would give. It is, if I want to do what you do and excel the way you are excelling at what you do, it should be in my interest to find out what you do when no one is watching.
That's right.
And when I find it and I begin doing it, it is likely I'll begin doing what you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
If anyone would read this book, there's a point that you get to and you feel like it feels like you're angry. When you keep telling people, you're watching too much TV, and you're expecting great success. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Because, like you just said, if I'm not growing as you're growing and yet I want to grow like you do, maybe I'm focusing on something I shouldn't be focusing on.
Yeah.
And that's an eye-opening for anyone who's looking up to becoming great.
Honestly, it's a wrong thing to look at other people. It is good to admire other people, but it is not right to admire them and actually be frustrated, stressed at what they are doing without you taking note of what they do, that you are not seeing. Every fruit, that tree brings fruit, but there was work underground. There was. And we are like trees. So there has to be work. What work am I putting in when no one is watching?
That's right.
That is the most important one. When you see a book out, people don't realize that there was unseen stuff going through. There was, you just admit that you thought this was researched well.
Yeah, that's right.
Lots of reading, lots of opening different minds, you know. A lot of, by the time someone sees a bestseller on a table, you don't know what went through that.
That's right.
It is that unseen that makes the bestseller. It is that unseen that makes the people will celebrate who they are. There is, every man has an unseen, every man and woman, they have an unseen place or part of them. And it is that unseen that gives birth to what we see.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we could talk about each of these concepts in length if we had time.
Yeah.
And before we leave chapter 2, there's something else that you mentioned that I think is worth talking about. And I wish you could write, actually you should write a book about just this point.
Wow.
And let me first read and I'll tell you.
Page
30. Page 30, you said, having a written life plan for our lives not only allows us to number our days in applying our hearts to wisdom, but also offers the privilege to live in the worlds our minds conceive. And page 31, you quoted Dr. Mike Murdoch he said, from the scriptures, God has given men over 45 instructions to write it down. And you said, we steward best what God shows us by writing it down. Once you envision it, capture it with your life plan. And I can't express how much you talk about having a well-written life plan in this book. Like you mentioned it so many times, and I felt like, you see, I know when you're writing a book, I know that it's got to be small enough for people to read it, and so you kind of have to cut off some parts.
Yeah.
Just focus, like pick the best out of it.
Yeah.
That may not actually capture everything that you wanted to talk about it, but I felt like I needed to also listen to you talking about this concept of writing down life plans. And when you speak about it in this chapter, you kind of trace it from the Psalm of Moses when he says we only live for 70 and sometimes 8 years. And may God give us wisdom to number our days. And you talk about how numbering our days comes from, it's best done through having a plan. So please tell us about that.
Wow. Interesting. So after writing this book, I began having this conviction that at least everyone should write a book. And when you writing, I believe, would be one of the guarantees that would outlive you.
That's right.
A guarantee after your death. Like, I believe there may be two things that would outlive you. Making lots of wealth, but even wealth flies.
That's right.
You can be a billionaire in one generation, 2 generations after you, it is gone. But I think writing has stood the test of time, so it is a good thing. So I have this conviction that everyone in their lifetime should write a book. And one, now this is, I'm trying to answer your question, but I've deviated. I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind.
One is you are living for people you will never see. And if you have an element of God in you, which I believe everyone has because we are created after His image, you have to live for a people you will never see. So this thing can be here for 500 years.
That's right.
Yeah. So the same is true for you, for me. And in the Holy Book, you will see a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. There is this thing I believe that in all the experiences you've gone through, say about life in general or about relationships, if we zero it down to relationships, if you wrote say a letter to your baby girl who will come at a certain time, and you said this is how you live to find the right man. Because you have an experience.
Yeah.
When your baby girl is a teenager and you hand her a 32 page, for example, booklet of how to find the right man out of your experience, your experience would have been maybe 20 years. When you hadn't had that book, your hunting had 20 years worth of experience.
Just one
In
small,
yeah, a
pamphlet or
booklet,
something.
yeah. In a big size, you know, it is a handful, a mouthful. When that little girl sits on that booklet and takes in that, she's taking in 20 years worth of wisdom.
That's right.
She's taking in that in a moment. It would be in one day, it would be in 1 week. So what you're doing, you're buying her 20 years. She would have spent in pain in one moment of sitting down and reading through it. She has taken in an inheritance. So really, what is inheritance really
I don't know
is,
where I didn't know where you were heading. Now it makes more perfect sense.
what really is happening, inheritance is really buying time for people.
Yeah.
When you hand someone a book, it took me 7 years to write this. When someone sits, you have told me you've gone through it a week. You are taking in stuff.
7 years.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
But we are talking about your little girl. 20 years worth of experience in a moment. Now, she will be better off than one who didn't have the opportunity. The ones that our friends in the Western world are beating us,
Yeah.
they are always receiving inheritance.
That's right.
We are not. And they are
Going
moving,
very far, yeah.
going further. And really, the same is also true. Their convictions, God has given us to put down in writing. And when we don't write them down, we rob a generation. So, what that means,
We literally robbed them.
yeah, what that means, us and robbers, they're not different. When you don't document your conviction, you have become a generational thief.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I'm strongly, because like Mike Maddox says, God has given men over 45 instructions to write down. If we are not writing down, it means we are robbing generations, and we become generational robbers. And that should stop. I believe that should stop. And I like to thank you for creating a platform like this, because we are addressing stuff like that, that not to generational robbery, and end to generational robbery.
Right.
So we need to begin writing down. And it would start by documenting a life plan.
Before you go into a life plan, I just want to make this emphasis. I don't remember who I was talking to recently, and we're saying, you look at Rwanda, you could easily say it was just born recently.
Yeah.
It was born in 1994.
Yeah.
So most of the businesses, most of the organizations that we see today were created at that time. Most of the churches that are making it big time in Rwanda, those churches that were born from within have been born after the genocide. So of course we have the Catholic, we have the Anglican. They have always been around even before the genocide, but they also started from the West.
Yeah.
But if you look at the businesses and the churches and other organizations that have started after 1994 genocide, these are the organizations that you and I, when we are in our 70s, those are the organizations that will be around. And after we are gone, our children are going to be employed in those businesses. They are going to be working in those organizations, and it will be pity for those young people to come. They can't find a trace of how these things started. So you start an organization, but you don't write a book about the challenges you made, how the thing grew, and all that. So it will be like we leave them with something, with a house that has no spirit. You know, there's a way that people, when they have lived in a house for a long time, just by entering into it, you kind of come to a contact with its history, its life. You kind of have like a touch of what it is. And I think when you talked about the need for people to write it down, also I think Christianity is the writing religion. We love to
I
say
love
that we are a
that.
singing
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah, it is a
And we sing a
writing.
lot,
Yeah.
but it's also a writing religion.
It is.
You look at the greatest story, the widespread stories of Moses, of David, of these other people, simply because they were written down. It's mainly because they were written down. And I think today when you look at people who are doing Christian apologetics for let's say, the resurrection of Christ and many other points that they raise, they go back to documents. So it's important to write down our convictions, especially for our future generations, not just my children, by the way, but other children who would like to know what it was like to have a talk show in 2025.
Exactly.
What was it like?
Yes.
So, yeah, I agree with you. But also,
Yeah.
but you can go first.
Sorry for jumping in. And you see, it is a bad thing. Every time we don't write, we give permission to people who do not know us to continue to tell our stories. And we are frustrated when they tell the wrong story. Yet we all the time have the opportunity to tell our story.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Are we lazy? I don't know what mindset is governing us. Because you find richness, a lot of richness in our culture, in even just talking about this example you brought of a TV show, how it was done in your time. You find that we do not document, we are not non-documenting people. And it is working against us.
Yeah.
But I believe it is about time we change that narrative. And especially, like you said, as a believer, you are part of a writing
Community.
heritage.
Yeah, that's right.
We cannot relegate that heritage to the people outside us, like from the West, to keep telling our stories. I believe it is high time as Rwandans, as Africans, begin telling our stories, begin documenting our convictions, begin, telling our family heritage, roots. We don't, like, honestly for me, I don't know 2 generations away who my great-grandparent was. And I should know.
You should, yeah.
I should know what happened to him, what did he do, what did he accomplish, what were his challenges,
Yeah.
But because those things are not there.
Yeah.
And I want to challenge our viewers, people watching, maybe would start by you documenting your processes in that thing you passed. Maybe a family, your family tree, Go back and interview those people. But right, document. Let there be something. Yeah.
Yeah, so as we finish, because I just realized that time has gone before we could realize it, but as we conclude, I wanted you to come back to why there is a need for us to write down our lives, to have a plan and to write it down. Why? You were talking about intentional living in that chapter, and I want people at least to take that home. But also tell us about where we can find the book. And if you are willing, you could also tell us the price or how to find you.
Wow. Maybe let me start with that. I'm on the social platforms. I use X a lot. I not left Instagram. X mostly on social platforms, WhatsApp. For the most part. You would find this book in Charisma at Italy Heights. I believe they still have copies. The other bookshop is in Kimirong, or I don't know if they still have copies. Arise bookshop opposite the university at the Roma. Opposite here. But it is really important for us to write. In the book I refer to the Martin Luther King Jr. story, where he wrote his I Have a Dream speech. That speech was written over 40 years ago, coming to 60 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah. But when he was writing that speech, I like to believe he saw Barack Obama as he was putting it down.
That's right.
And the I Have a Dream speech in 2008 became alive when Barack Obama became the president. But it was a dream a man had 40, 50 years back that gave rise to a thing in reality. We cannot afford to discount the things God bless in our hearts by ignoring them. Most of my books are sometimes ideas I get from reading a thing, and when I share it, people are like, how did you come up with that? And it was an idea that I wrote down, and I began working on it. And my new project is about, I was reading the Bible recently, and I came across a statement which caught my attention. Jesus was saying to, I think, Pharisees, have you not read? So it is interesting.
Yeah.
Jesus expects us to read.
Yeah.
Have you not read? I know that guy, Jesus, had read the whole 5 books of the law. And he was reasoning with the doctors of the law. So he was a well-read guy.
Yeah.
So I read that thing, and this would be a good book to write. So it is my new project. I've announced that, and it is good for us to begin reading. Yeah.
I'm sad that we didn't get to talk about competence and character. I'm sad that we didn't get to talk about understanding, the chapter they call understanding, and also what you talk about reading. There's what you said on page 68. We didn't get a chance to talk about mentorship. And, I mean, there's a lot that we could have covered today, but I think time is not on our side. Yeah. And you'll allow me to close from here. But if we should do part 2 of this book. I don't believe that we did justice to this book. It would be awesome for us at least. Maybe next time we will try to go through it first as much as we can. But I just want to thank you, man. There's none of what I said earlier to you before the camera and even during the interview that I was exaggerating about. I believe there's too much wisdom in this book. Wow. And I've read a number of books by local authors, but this one is rich in its own way. Wow. Like, seriously. So just want to say thank you for writing this book and for coming over tonight. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
I hope to see you very soon. And I want to thank our viewers for always tuning in and for watching us. It's such a joy for us to share with you the wisdom, the knowledge, the insights that come from the guests that we always invite. And we can't wait to have you next time. Again, this is CNM Podcast. It's a podcast that is organized by Christ for the Nations Ministries. And I'm Vitaly Muvunyi, your proud host. See you next Sunday. God bless you.